The U.S. imports almost all of the potash fertilizer we use, so this could change how farmers choose to plant and ultimately leave them with less revenue. Right now, there's a 10% tariff on that type of fertilizer that comes in from Canada.
In 2023, the U.S. produced about 400,000 tons of potash, but they consumed 5.3 million tons of it. President Trump has talked about, I want automakers in the U.S., I want things made in the U.S. so that we're not importing from places like Canada.
August 1st, 2025. The day fertilizer joined the ranks of oil and semiconductors as a weapon of statecraft. It started quietly. A 10% tariff here, a campaign jab there. But within weeks it escalated into something far more volatile. An economic crossfire between the United States and its oldest, most polite ally, Canada. Forget oil barrels, forget lithium mines. The most explosive resource on the global chessboard right now is potash. Soft pink granules buried deep beneath Saskatchewan soil. Potassium-rich and agriculture-critical, it's the chemical backbone behind half of the world's food, and Canada owns the lion's share, over 38% of global production. The US? It barely scrapes together 400,000 tons a year, yet devours more than 5 million. In July 2025, what was once a forgotten commodity suddenly became a headline. President Trump, seeking leverage in his America First 2.0 inches doctrine, stood on an Ohio stage and dropped the rhetorical bomb. If Canada doesn't want to play by our rules, maybe it's time they become our 51st state. Hours later, the White House confirmed a staggering 35% tariff on all Canadian exports, potash included. It was economic shock therapy, Trump style, but Ottawa didn't blink. No public retaliation, no retaliation at all, at least not the kind you can chant about at rallies. Instead, Canadian officials huddled behind closed doors and pulled out the one lever Washington wasn't prepared for: supply recalibration. No embargo, no fanfare, just strategic whispers. What if we slow the tap? What if Canada, the quiet agricultural partner in North America's food chain, stopped playing the role of invisible backbone and started acting like the global super supplier it actually is? Make no mistake, this isn't about fertilizer, it's about control, power, leverage. And Canada has it. U.S. farmers are already feeling the squeeze. From Kansas to Nebraska, fertilizer costs have surged by more than 20% in just 6 weeks. Procurement delays are creeping into fall planting schedules, and while Washington obsesses over campaign optics, grain producers are doing the math. Higher input costs mean lower yields. Lower yields mean thinner margins, and for rural America that means political revolt. Then came the letter. The National Farmers Union, not known for theatrics, issued a rare public condemnation of the White House's tariff blitz. Their message was unambiguous. This isn't policy, it's sabotage. Canada won't suffer, we will. But while the Midwest burns, the real fire is spreading east, to Beijing. Since June, Chinese trade envoys have quietly intensified negotiations with Ottawa, eyeing not just potash, but a comprehensive realignment of agri-energy supply chains. For a China boxed in by Russian instability and Belarusian sanctions, Canada offers the one thing they crave more than minerals: predictability. A 10-day rail-to-sea corridor from Saskatchewan to Asia, skipping the US entirely? That's not just convenient, it's strategic bypass. Beijing sees what Washington refuses to acknowledge. Canada is no longer just America's backyard resource depot, it's a swing state on the world's supply map. Every ship that leaves a Canadian port for China instead of Houston shifts the balance. Every long-term potash contract signed with the CCP is one less card in Washington's deck. And it's not just agriculture. Canada's $40 billion LNG megaproject just sent its first eastbound shipment, bypassing the US Gulf entirely. With the Trans Mountain Pipeline online, Alberta oil is now flowing west to the Pacific. Energy that once fed American refineries is heading to Seoul, Tokyo, and Shanghai. This isn't a trade rift, it's continental uncoupling. Yet, the financial markets figured it out before the politicians. In just 3 weeks, potash futures spiked over 18%. Bloomberg's analysts didn't mince words. This isn't market fluctuation, it's preemptive hedging. Hedge funds are pouring billions into Canadian mining giants, betting that this pink powder has geopolitical teeth. They're not wrong. As capital floods into the potash sector, volatility surges. And unlike the US, most developing countries can't absorb fertilizer price shocks. For them, this isn't trade strategy, it's food security, a survival lifeline. When potash becomes a financial instrument instead of a stable supply, the dominoes fall fast. What's happening here isn't isolated, it's systemic, it's strategic, and it's global. Saskatchewan's soil now feeds Beijing's calculations, Wall Street's bets, and Washington's growing anxiety. Canada, long seen as a cooperative junior partner, has become the anchor of a new kind of power structure, one defined not by missiles or markets but by inputs. Who controls them, who gets them, and at what price? And the real question, one that echoes across think tanks and war rooms alike, isn't if Canada will leverage that control. It's how. The pressure was supposed to break Canada. Tariffs, threats, humiliation. That was the strategy. But something else happened. Canada didn't retaliate. It recalibrated. While the White House fumed and American farmers scrambled, Ottawa moved with surgical precision. No sweeping bans, no podium theatrics, just a new playbook, quiet, targeted, and devastatingly effective. At the core was a billion-dollar pivot. Steel. Not potash, not gas, steel. Prime Minister Mark Carney didn't need a fight to prove a point. Instead, he transformed Canada's steel sector from a legacy industry into a national security asset. The plan? Electrify blast furnaces, integrate hydrogen, build the cleanest, most traceable steel in the G7, and then embed it deep into procurement policy, from high-speed rail to military vehicles. Steel became leverage, and leverage became law. More than an economic maneuver, it was a declaration. Canada would not be bullied into dependency. Every policy, every dollar of investment carried the same message: resilience over retaliation. But Carney's real genius wasn't in how he responded. It was in what he didn't do. He paused Canada's controversial digital services tax, a policy aimed squarely at US tech giants. Superficially, a concession. In reality, a delay. Time bought. Tensions de-escalated. Canada walked away with its moral high ground intact and its economic leverage untouched. Instead of trade war, Carney launched surgical tariffs, 8% to 10% on recreational goods, processed foods, and non-essential imports. Nothing structural, nothing explosive, but everything politically sensitive. The goal? Stir discontent. Inside the US. By pressuring consumer sectors, Carney forced domestic lobbies to turn inward, raising costs in red states, sowing dissent in swing districts, and triggering a backlash that Washington didn't see coming. No fire, just friction. And friction wins wars that bombs can't. Meanwhile, on the trading floors of Toronto and London, potash became the hottest asset of the year. What was once an overlooked commodity was now trading like rare earths. Hedge funds hedged against inflation. Sovereign wealth funds built positions, and every investment into a Canadian mine became a bet against American predictability. But the real tremor wasn't financial, it was geopolitical. In May 2025, a G7 FAO joint report made it plain. A global potash shock would hit developing nations first, and hardest. More than 30 low-income countries rely on predictable, affordable fertilizer to keep food systems intact. With Canadian exports in flux and Russian alternatives unreliable, a perfect storm was forming: Africa, Southeast Asia, Latin America. Governments scrambled to subsidize, crops declined, inflation surged, social unrest bubbled. And for those watching closely, the message was unavoidable. Inputs control outcomes, and Canada now controls the inputs. The ripple effect didn't stop at food. Energy markets, once tightly integrated across North America, are now fragmenting. With the Trans Mountain Pipeline online and LNG terminals operational, Canada's barrels are sailing east, not south. No embargo, no declarations. Just a quiet severing of assumptions. For decades, the US believed it could shape Canadian supply. That assumption is gone. Every new export deal signed in Asia is a contract not signed in America. And while Washington plays catch-up, Canadian infrastructure has already moved on. New ports, new contracts, new customers, no drama, just distance. This is the part no one in Washington wants to say out loud. Canada doesn't need America anymore, not the way it used to. The pipelines, railways, and back-channel logistics that once kept US agriculture, fuel, and steel humming are now rerouting. Canada isn't burning bridges, it's just building others, quietly, efficiently, and permanently. And the result? Continental divorce. Quiet, structural, irreversible. But the stakes go far beyond North America. As Canada consolidates its influence over fertilizer, food, and fuel, it doesn't just become an exporter, it becomes a gatekeeper. And in a world where climate shocks, wars, and failed diplomacy threaten global food flows, the gatekeeper sets the terms. Who eats, who plants, who pays. That's not just leverage, that's power. And power, in 2025, isn't built with missiles or megaphones, it's built with logistics, with minerals, with a calm refusal to fold. The United States gambled that tariffs would bring Canada to heel. Instead, it revealed how fragile its own assumptions were. That access could be taken for granted, that partners wouldn't pivot, that old alliances would hold. None of those things are true anymore. Canada, once the junior partner in a lopsided relationship, has redrawn the map, politely, relentlessly, strategically. It didn't need to make threats, it just had to make moves. And now, a question looms, not over Saskatchewan or Ottawa, but over every global capital watching this unfold. Who's next? Because in a fractured world of weaponized trade and eroding trust, the new front lines aren't marked by soldiers, they're marked by supply chains, and those who control them, control everything.